What's up, everyone? Tonight, we're diving deep into one of history's most fascinating topics, the diet of gladiators in ancient Rome. Picture this. You're about to discover what fueled the most legendary fighters in human history. And trust me, it's not what you think. So before you get comfortable, like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and current time. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from around the world. Now turn off the lights, maybe switch on a fan for that gentle background sound, and let's begin our journey tonight. You wake up in a gladiator school, known as a ludus, and the first thing that hits you isn't the sound of clashing swords or the smell of leather armor. It's the aroma of barley porridge wafting from the kitchen, mixed with the earthy scent of beans and the sharp tang of vinegar. Your stomach growls, a deep, rumbling reminder that even the most fearsome warriors need fuel to survive another day of training. The morning light filters through the small window of your cell, casting long shadows across the rough stone floor. You stretch your aching muscles, feeling the familiar soreness from yesterday's brutal training session. But before you can even think about picking up a sword, you need to eat. The lanista, your trainer and owner, has made it clear: a hungry gladiator is a dead gladiator. You probably wouldn't survive this morning workout without proper nutrition. You shuffle toward the communal eating area, bare feet slapping against the cold stone. The sound echoes through the corridor, joining the symphony of other gladiators beginning their day. The air is thick with steam from the cooking pots, and you can hear the rhythmic scraping of wooden spoons against clay bowls. This isn't room service at the Colosseum Hilton. This is survival cuisine at its most basic. The morning meal sits before you in a simple clay bowl, a thick, gruel-like porridge made primarily from barley, with chunks of beans and perhaps a few vegetables floating in the mixture. It's not particularly appetizing to look at, the consistency of wet sand, the color of muddy water. But you've learned that appearance means nothing when your life depends on strength and endurance. You dip your wooden spoon into the porridge and take your first bite. The texture is coarse, almost gritty, but there's a surprising hardiness to it. The barley provides complex carbohydrates that will sustain you through hours of training, while the beans add protein to help rebuild your muscles. Historians still debate whether gladiators received additional protein sources in their morning meals, but most agree that this barley-based porridge formed the foundation of their nutrition. As you eat, you notice the careful attention paid to portion sizes. Each gladiator receives exactly what they need, no more, no less. The trainers understand that feeding a gladiator is an investment. Too little food, and you'll collapse during training. Too much, and you'll become sluggish and slow. It's a delicate balance that requires the same precision as swordplay. The social dynamics of a morning meal are fascinating to observe. Veteran gladiators sit together, their scarred faces serious as they methodically consume their porridge. They eat with purpose, not pleasure. New arrivals, like yourself, watch and learn. There's an unspoken hierarchy even in how the food is distributed. The most successful fighters receive slightly larger portions or perhaps an extra handful of dried fruit. You notice that the morning meal is consumed in relative silence. This isn't a time for conversation or camaraderie. It's a ritual, almost sacred in its importance. The scraping of spoons against bowls creates a rhythmic meditation, preparing both body and mind for the day ahead. The steam rising from the warm porridge catches the morning light, creating small clouds that dissipate quickly in the cool air. One particularly interesting aspect of the gladiators' morning meal is the inclusion of what ancient Romans called pasca, a mixture of vinegar and water that served as both a drink and a flavoring agent. You take a sip and immediately understand why this was considered essential. The acidity cuts through the heaviness of the porridge, cleansing your palate and providing a sharp wake-up call to your senses. Modern nutritionists would recognize this as an early form of electrolyte replacement. The kitchen staff, mostly slaves themselves, move efficiently through the eating area, refilling bowls and ensuring no one goes hungry. They understand the importance of their role in this deadly ecosystem. A poorly fed gladiator reflects badly on the entire school. And in ancient Rome, reputation was everything. As you finish your meal, you begin to understand that this simple porridge represents something much larger than breakfast. It's the foundation of a carefully calculated system designed to create the ultimate fighting machine. Every ingredient has been chosen for a specific purpose, every portion size calculated to maximize performance. The morning meal isn't just about satisfying hunger, it's about preparing for survival. The empty bowl sits before you, and you realize that in just a few hours, you'll be back here again, preparing for the next meal in this carefully orchestrated dance between nutrition and combat. The gladiator's life is measured not just in victories and defeats, but in the steady rhythm of meals that fuel the endless cycle of training and fighting. You're standing in the storage rooms of the ludus, surrounded by massive clay amphorae that reach nearly to your shoulders. The air is thick with dust motes dancing in shafts of golden afternoon light, and there's a sweet, earthy smell that seems to emanate from the very walls themselves. This is where the real secret of gladiatorial power lies. Not in the gleaming weapons or the roar of the crowd, but in these humble containers filled with what the Romans called hordearii, the barley men. The nickname should tell you everything you need to know about what truly fueled these legendary warriors. You run your fingers along the rough surface of an amphora, feeling the subtle ridges left by the potter's wheel. Inside, thousands of small, pearl-colored grains rest in darkness, waiting to be transformed into the foundation of strength. Barley wasn't just food for gladiators. It was their identity, their fuel, their very essence distilled into grain form. You scoop a handful of the raw barley from an open container, letting the grains cascade through your fingers like tiny pebbles. Each one is perfectly formed, about the size of a rice grain, but more substantial, with a subtle nutty aroma that hints at the complex flavors it will develop once cooked. The texture is surprisingly smooth, almost polished, and you can understand why ancient Romans considered this grain precious enough to base an entire diet upon. The trainers have made it clear that barley provides what modern nutritionists would call complex carbohydrates, though they describe it simply as strength that lasts. Unlike the quick energy burst from honey or fruit, barley releases its power slowly, sustaining you through hours of brutal training without the crash that comes from simpler foods. You probably wouldn't last 10 minutes in the practice ring without this steady fuel burning in your system. What's particularly fascinating is how this humble grain became the cornerstone of gladiatorial nutrition across the entire Roman Empire. Archaeological evidence from gladiator schools in Pompeii, Ephesus, and even distant Britain shows the same pattern. Massive stores of barley, carefully preserved and rationed. The Romans understood something that modern athletes are only rediscovering, that sustained performance requires sustained nutrition. You watch as the kitchen slaves begin the daily ritual of barley preparation. They work with practiced efficiency, their movements creating a rhythmic symphony of grinding, mixing, and stirring. The grain is first soaked in large wooden tubs, the water slowly penetrating each kernel until it swells and softens. The sound of barley hitting water is like gentle rain on a roof. Thousands of tiny splashes that blend into a continuous, soothing whisper. The next step involves grinding some of the barley into flour using massive stone querns. You can hear the steady scraping as the upper stone rotates against the lower, crushing the grain into a coarse meal. The slaves lean into their work, their muscles straining against the resistance. And you realize that even preparing gladiator food requires gladiator-like strength. It's almost like they're training for the arena themselves, just with different tools. Historians still debate whether gladiators received their barley in multiple forms throughout the day, or if it was primarily consumed as the morning porridge. Recent analysis of gladiator bones from cemetery sites suggests that their diet was remarkably consistent, with barley comprising up to 80% of their caloric intake. This wasn't dietary restriction. It was dietary perfection, refined over centuries of trial and error. The preparation process reveals the sophistication of Roman nutritional understanding. Some barley is left whole for texture and slower digestion, while other portions are ground into flour for easier absorption. Certain amounts are fermented slightly, creating beneficial bacteria that aid digestion, a process that wouldn't be scientifically understood for another 1,000 years, but one that Roman trainers knew worked through careful observation. You notice that different grades of barley are stored in separate containers. The finest, almost white grains are reserved for the most valuable gladiators, while newer fighters receive a coarser, darker variety that's equally nutritious but less refined. Even in the ancient world, there was a hierarchy of grain quality, and your place in the gladiatorial food chain was literally determined by the size and color of your barley ration. The economics of barley consumption in a gladiator school are staggering. A single ludus might consume several tons of barley per month, making it one of the largest food expenses after the initial cost of purchasing and training the gladiators themselves. The grain had to be transported from farms across the empire, stored in appropriate conditions, and prepared daily by skilled workers. It was a logistical operation that would impress modern supply chain managers. As evening approaches, you watch the final preparation of tomorrow's barley rations. The process is almost meditative. The careful measuring, the gentle stirring, the gradual addition of water and seasonings. Each portion is prepared with the same attention to detail that a gladiator would give to maintaining his weapons. Because in many ways, this humble grain is the most important weapon in a gladiator's arsenal. The storage room grows quiet as the day's work concludes. The amphorae stand sentinel in the gathering darkness, their contents representing the hopes and dreams of dozens of fighters. Tomorrow, this barley will become porridge, bread, and gruel. It will fuel training sessions, heal injuries, and provide the steady energy needed for survival in one of history's most demanding professions. Standing among these containers, you begin to understand that gladiatorial combat wasn't just about skill with a sword. It was about the perfect marriage of nutrition and performance, sustained over months and years of careful preparation. The barley around you represents thousands of meals, countless training sessions, and the unwavering dedication to turning grain into gladiatorial gold. You're sitting across from a group of gladiators in the late afternoon sun, watching them methodically work their way through bowls of what looks suspiciously like a modern vegetarian's dream meal. The irony isn't lost on you. These men, trained to be the ultimate embodiment of Roman machismo and violence, are essentially following a plant-based diet that would make your yoga instructor weep with joy. The scene before you challenges everything you thought you knew about ancient warriors. There's Marcus, a towering Thracian with arms like tree trunks, delicately picking beans from his bowl with the precision of a surgeon. Next to him, Gaius, a veteran retiarius whose net fighting skills are legendary, is savoring what appears to be a lentil stew with the same focus he'd used to study his opponent's weaknesses. You can't help but think they'd probably dominate at a modern farmer's market. The absence of meat from their diet isn't an accident or a punishment. It's a carefully calculated decision that would have made ancient Roman nutritionists proud, if they had nutritionists back then. The gladiators consume massive quantities of legumes, vegetables, and grains, creating a protein profile that rivals anything a modern athlete might design. Chickpeas, lentils, black-eyed peas, and various beans form the backbone of their nutrition, providing not just sustenance, but the building blocks for the impressive musculature that makes crowds roar. You watch as the kitchen staff brings out the evening selection, a thick stew made from fava beans, seasoned with herbs that fill the air with an aroma so rich it seems to have weight. The beans have been cooked until they're tender enough to mash with a wooden spoon, creating a protein-rich paste that's both filling and easily digestible. The gladiators attack this meal with the same intensity they'd bring to combat, understanding that every bite is building tomorrow's strength. The historical record is remarkably clear about this plant-based approach to gladiatorial nutrition. Archaeological analysis of gladiator bones from ancient cemeteries reveals a diet high in plant proteins and notably low in animal products. This wasn't due to poverty or lack of access to meat. Gladiators were valuable investments, and their owners spared no expense in keeping them healthy. The vegetarian diet was a conscious choice based on centuries of empirical observation. Historians still debate whether this plant-based diet was purely practical or if it had deeper philosophical implications tied to Roman concepts of purity and ritual preparation. Some suggest that avoiding meat was believed to reduce aggression outside of combat, creating fighters who were fierce in the arena but manageable in training. Others argue it was simply the most efficient way to build the kind of sustained strength needed for prolonged combat. You notice how the gladiators' meals are supplemented with an impressive variety of vegetables that would make any modern nutritionist nod in approval. Turnips, onions, garlic, and various leafy greens appear regularly, providing essential vitamins and minerals that support recovery and immune function. The Romans might not have understood the science of micronutrients, but they certainly understood the results. One particularly interesting aspect of the gladiators' vegetarian diet is the emphasis on what we now call complete proteins. By combining various legumes with grains and nuts, the ancient trainers created meals that provided all the essential amino acids needed for muscle development and repair. It's a nutritional sophistication that wouldn't be fully understood scientifically until the 20th century, yet Roman ludus chefs were implementing it with remarkable success. The social dynamics around these plant-based meals are fascinating to observe. There's no sense of deprivation or longing for meat among the gladiators. They approach their vegetarian fare with the same seriousness they'd bring to weapon training, understanding that their plant-based diet is what separates them from ordinary citizens. In a culture where meat consumption was often a sign of wealth and status, gladiators found their identity in the deliberate rejection of that symbol. You watch as newer gladiators are introduced to this dietary regimen, their initial skepticism gradually giving way to appreciation as they experience the sustained energy and recovery benefits. The veterans take pleasure in explaining how different plant proteins affect performance, how lentils provide steady energy for long training sessions, how chickpeas aid in muscle recovery, how various beans contribute to the dense, functional muscle mass that defines a successful gladiator. The preparation of these vegetarian meals is an art form in itself. The kitchen staff have developed techniques for maximizing both nutrition and flavor from plant-based ingredients. Beans are soaked overnight, then slow-cooked with aromatic herbs until they reach the perfect texture. Vegetables are prepared in ways that preserve their nutritional value while making them palatable to men who spend their days engaged in physical combat. What's particularly remarkable is how this plant-based diet contributed to the gladiators' legendary endurance. Modern sports science confirms what Roman trainers knew instinctively, that plant-based nutrition can support high-level athletic performance while reducing inflammation and improving recovery times. The gladiators' ability to fight multiple bouts in a single day, to train for hours without fatigue, and to maintain their strength over years of competition was largely due to their carefully constructed vegetarian diet. As the evening meal concludes, you realize you're witnessing something that challenges modern assumptions about both ancient nutrition and the nature of strength itself. These plant-powered warriors represent a sophisticated understanding of the relationship between food and performance, one that modern athletes are only beginning to rediscover. In a world where protein powder and energy drinks dominate sports nutrition, there's something beautifully simple about the gladiators' approach. Eat plants, train hard, fight well. The empty bowls before you tell the story of a dietary philosophy that sustains some of history's most formidable athletes. Tomorrow, these same gladiators will return to their plant-based meals, continuing a tradition that proves strength doesn't always come from the expected sources. You're kneeling beside a well in the center of the ludus courtyard, watching as bucket after bucket of clear, cool water is drawn up from the depths below. The rope creaks rhythmically against the wooden pulley, and each bucket creates a small splash as it breaks the surface, sending ripples across the dark water below. This isn't just any well. This is the lifeline that keeps Rome's most valuable athletes functioning at peak performance. The sound of water being poured into clay vessels fills the air with a gentle, almost musical quality. You cup your hands and take a drink, feeling the coolness spread through your chest and down into your stomach. The water tastes clean and mineral-rich, with a subtle earthiness that speaks of deep aquifers and natural filtration through limestone. It's the kind of water that makes you realize how much we take hydration for granted in the modern world. But water alone isn't enough for gladiators whose training sessions can last for hours under the scorching Mediterranean sun. You watch as the kitchen staff begins preparing what the Romans call pasca, a mixture of water and vinegar that serves as both a thirst quencher and a performance enhancer. The smell of the vinegar is sharp and acidic, cutting through the heavy air like a blade, but when diluted with water, it becomes surprisingly refreshing. The process of making pasca is almost ceremonial in its precision. The vinegar is added slowly, drop by drop, while the mixture is stirred with a long wooden spoon. Too much vinegar and the drink becomes unpalatable. Too little and it loses its effectiveness. The slaves who prepare this ancient sports drink have perfected their measurements through years of practice, creating a consistency that would make modern beverage manufacturers envious. You take your first sip of pasca and immediately understand why gladiators swear by it. The initial tartness gives way to a clean, almost cleansing sensation that seems to cut through the heaviness of the barley-based meals. The acidity helps with digestion while providing electrolytes that modern sports scientists would recognize as essential for athletic performance. It's like Gatorade, but with a Roman twist and probably fewer artificial colors. The historical significance of pasca extends far beyond the gladiator schools. This was the drink of choice for Roman soldiers throughout the empire, and archaeological evidence suggests it was consumed by everyone from common laborers to wealthy citizens. The fact that gladiators shared this beverage with the Roman legions speaks to a deeper cultural understanding of what the body needs to perform under extreme conditions. Wine also plays a role in the gladiators' liquid diet, though not in the way you might expect. Rather than the refined wines enjoyed by wealthy Romans, gladiators receive what could charitably be called table wine, a rough, unfiltered beverage that's more about calories and mild sedation than pleasure. You sample a cup and immediately understand why it's not winning any ancient wine competitions. The flavor is harsh and earthy, with notes of wood and what might generously be described as character. Historians still debate whether gladiators were allowed wine during active training periods or if it was reserved for rest days and special occasions. Some evidence suggests that wine consumption was strictly regulated, with trainers understanding that alcohol could interfere with the precision and reflexes needed for combat. Others argue that the caloric content and mild relaxation effects made wine a valuable tool for recovery and stress management. The serving vessels themselves tell a story of function over form. Heavy clay cups, designed to withstand the rough handling of men whose hands are more accustomed to weapons than delicate pottery, line the dining areas. The cups are thick-walled and unadorned, built to last through countless meals and the inevitable clumsiness that comes with exhaustion after intense training sessions. You notice how the gladiators approach their drinks with the same methodical precision they bring to combat. There's no casual sipping or social drinking here. Every gulp is purposeful, designed to replace lost fluids and provide the nutrients needed for continued performance. The veterans teach the newcomers not just what to drink, but when and how much, creating a hydration strategy that's surprisingly sophisticated for its time. The timing of fluid consumption is particularly interesting to observe. Gladiators don't drink large quantities during meals, understanding instinctively that this would interfere with digestion. Instead, they sip small amounts throughout the day, maintaining consistent hydration levels without overwhelming their systems. It's a practice that modern athletes have refined with scientific precision, but one that ancient fighters discovered through trial and error. As the day progresses, you watch the careful rationing of drinks based on individual needs and training schedules. Gladiators preparing for combat receive additional Pascha rations, while those recovering from injuries might be given diluted wine to help with pain management and sleep. The drink distribution is as carefully planned as the food portions, with trainers keeping detailed mental records of each fighter's consumption patterns. The social aspects of drinking in the ludus are minimal but significant. There's no Roman equivalent of gathering around the water cooler for gossip. Hydration is serious business here. However, the shared experience of drinking Pascha creates a subtle bond among the gladiators, a common experience that transcends their different backgrounds and fighting styles. What's particularly fascinating is how these ancient drinking practices influence the broader Roman culture. The popularity of Pascha spread from military and gladiatorial use to civilian consumption, becoming a common drink among working-class Romans throughout the empire. In many ways, the gladiators' liquid diet helped shape the drinking habits of an entire civilization. As evening approaches and the training day winds down, you watch the final distribution of drinks. The gladiators gather their rations with the same respect they'd show for their weapons, understanding that proper hydration is as crucial to their survival as skill with a sword. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new training sessions, and new opportunities to prove themselves worthy of the crowd's adoration. You're standing in the office of a lanista, surrounded by wax tablets covered in careful calculations that would make a modern accountant weep with recognition. The air smells of lamp oil and papyrus, with an underlying hint of leather from the money pouches stacked on a nearby shelf. These aren't just business records. They're the financial blueprint for keeping human fighting machines at peak performance, and the numbers are absolutely staggering. The lanista, a former gladiator himself, whose scarred hands now hold stylus instead of sword, runs his finger down a column of figures with the precision of someone who understands that every sestertius spent on food directly translates to survival in the arena. He's calculating the monthly food budget for 60 gladiators, and you can practically hear his brain working through the mathematics of life and death. You probably wouldn't want to be his accountant during tax season. The cost breakdown is fascinating in its complexity. Barley, the foundation of the gladiatorial diet, represents the largest single expense, roughly 40% of the entire food budget. You watch as he calculates the daily barley requirements. 2 pounds per gladiator, multiplied by 60 fighters, multiplied by 30 days. The result is a staggering 3,600 pounds of grain per month, not counting waste, spoilage, or the extra rations given to fighters preparing for major contests. But barley is just the beginning. The ledger reveals line items for beans, lentils, chickpeas, and various vegetables that form the protein foundation of the gladiatorial diet. Each legume has its own price point, its own seasonal availability, and its own nutritional purpose. The lanista explains how chickpeas cost nearly twice as much as regular beans, but provide superior protein density, an investment that pays dividends when your gladiators need to maintain muscle mass on a plant-based diet. The logistics of feeding gladiators extend far beyond simple purchasing. You examine shipping receipts from grain merchants across the Mediterranean, each document representing a complex web of transportation, storage, and quality control. Barley from Egypt, beans from Gaul, olive oil from Spain. The gladiator's diet requires resources from across the empire, making each meal a testament to Roman logistics and trade networks. Storage costs alone would bankrupt most modern households. The massive amphorae that hold the grain require specialized warehouses, temperature control, and constant monitoring for pests and moisture. You run your hand along the smooth surface of a clay storage jar and realize that even this simple container represents a significant investment. Handcrafted by skilled potters, transported carefully to avoid breakage, and sealed with wax to preserve its contents. Historians still debate whether gladiator schools operated as profitable enterprises or if they were primarily prestige projects that wealthy Romans funded as a form of conspicuous consumption. The financial records suggest a more complex reality. Successful ludus operations could generate substantial profits through careful management, but the initial investment and ongoing costs were enormous. A single gladiator's yearly food budget could feed a typical Roman family for several months. The seasonal variations in food costs add another layer of complexity to the financial calculations. Winter barley commands premium prices, while summer vegetables are relatively affordable. The Lanista shows you how he times purchases to take advantage of seasonal price fluctuations, buying grain in bulk during harvest season and storing it in climate-controlled warehouses. It's supply chain management that would impress modern business schools. Labor costs for food preparation represent another significant expense. The skilled slaves who prepare gladiator meals aren't just cooks. They're specialized nutritionists whose understanding of food preparation can mean the difference between a winning fighter and a dead one. You watch as the Lanista calculates wages for kitchen staff, noting how the head cook earns more than some skilled craftsmen in the city. The economics of gladiator feeding also reveal the broader Roman attitude toward investment in human capital. Unlike modern athletes who might receive endorsement deals and appearance fees, gladiators were property, expensive, valuable property that required careful maintenance. The food budget reflects this reality, with every meal designed to maximize return on investment through improved performance and longevity. Quality control measures add yet another cost layer to the operation. The Lanista employs food tasters whose job is to ensure that every batch of grain meets nutritional standards and hasn't been contaminated during transport or storage. These specialists can detect subtle variations in barley quality that might affect digestion or energy levels, skills that command premium wages in the competitive world of gladiatorial training. You notice how the financial records track not just purchases but consumption patterns, allowing the Lanista to identify which gladiators require additional nutrition and which might be wasting food. It's data analytics applied to ancient athletics, with spreadsheets carved in wax instead of stored in computers. The attention to detail would make modern sports nutritionists proud. The profit margins on gladiator schools were surprisingly thin, despite the glamorous reputation of the profession. After accounting for food costs, training expenses, medical care, and facility maintenance, successful Lanistas operated on razor-thin margins that required constant attention to efficiency and cost control. One bad harvest or shipping delay could threaten the entire operation's financial stability. As you leave the office, you realize that the gladiator's diet wasn't just about nutrition. It was about economics, logistics, and the complex financial machinery that supported Rome's most popular entertainment. Every bowl of barley porridge represented a carefully calculated investment in human performance, backed by accounting systems that would be recognizable to modern business managers. You're watching the pre-dawn ritual unfold in the training courtyard, where gladiators gather like shadows around steaming bowls of what could generously be called performance fuel. The air is cool and crisp, carrying the scent of olive oil heating over wood fires and the earthy aroma of fresh ground barley meal. Your breath creates small puffs of vapor in the morning chill, and you can hear the soft scraping of wooden spoons against clay as 50 men prepare their bodies for another day of controlled violence. The training table isn't actually a table at all. It's a collection of low benches arranged in a rough circle around the kitchen area, where gladiators consume their pre-workout meals with the focused intensity of surgeons preparing for operations. The food itself looks deceptively simple. Thick porridge mixed with honey, small portions of dried fruit, and cups of diluted pasca that catch the first rays of sunlight filtering through the courtyard's high walls. You settle onto one of the benches beside a veteran Murmillo whose scarred hands handle his breakfast with surprising delicacy. The porridge is warm and substantial, with a consistency that reminds you of modern protein shakes, though considerably more appetizing than most supplement drinks you'd find at a contemporary gym. The honey adds sweetness without overwhelming the nutty flavor of the barley, creating a taste that's both comforting and energizing. The timing of this meal is crucial. Consumed exactly 1 hour before training begins to allow for proper digestion, without creating the sluggishness that comes from exercising on a full stomach. The gladiators eat with methodical precision, understanding that their morning fuel needs to sustain them through hours of weapons practice, conditioning exercises, and tactical drills that would challenge modern professional athletes. What's particularly fascinating is how different fighting styles require slightly different nutritional approaches during training. The heavily armored secutors receive larger portions of slow-burning carbohydrates to fuel their endurance-based fighting style, while the more agile retiarii get smaller, more frequent meals that won't weigh them down during their lightning-fast net and trident combat. It's personalized nutrition that predates sports science by nearly 2 millennia. Historians still debate whether gladiator trainers understood the specific metabolic demands of different combat styles, or if these dietary variations developed through trial and error over generations of observation. The precision suggests sophisticated understanding, but the lack of written nutritional theory from the period leaves room for academic speculation about how this knowledge was developed and transmitted. You watch as the trainers circulate through the group, observing each gladiator's eating habits with the attention of coaches monitoring their athletes. They note who finishes their portions quickly, who struggles with their appetite, and who might need additional nutrition to support their training load. It's performance monitoring disguised as mealtime supervision, and the data they collect informally guides future meal planning. The social dynamics around the training table reveal the complex hierarchy within gladiator schools. Veterans sit together, sharing quiet conversation about technique and strategy, while newcomers eat in relative silence, still learning the unspoken rules of this deadly profession. The arrangement isn't accidental. Experienced fighters serve as informal mentors, and shared meals provide opportunities for knowledge transfer that extends far beyond nutrition. The mid-morning snack arrives as training intensifies, carried by kitchen slaves who weave between sparring pairs with practiced ease. Small clay cups filled with what looks like an ancient energy bar, compressed dates, nuts, and honey formed into dense, portable nutrition. You bite into one and immediately understand the appeal. Intense sweetness balanced by the satisfying crunch of almonds, providing quick energy without requiring a break from training activities. As the day progresses, you notice how food consumption is carefully timed around different training phases. Light snacks during weapon practice, more substantial portions during rest periods, and constant access to pasca for hydration. The gladiators never gorge themselves, but they're never truly hungry either. A constant state of optimal fueling that maintains energy levels throughout exhausting training sessions. The afternoon brings a more substantial meal consumed in the shade of the portico, where exhausted gladiators gather to refuel and recover. The portions are larger now, thick stews made from lentils and vegetables, chunks of coarse bread for dipping, and cups of diluted wine that help with pain management and relaxation. The atmosphere is more relaxed, with conversation flowing freely as the day's training winds down. You observe how the trainers use mealtime as an opportunity for informal education, discussing strategy and technique while gladiators eat. It's multitasking that maximizes the efficiency of every moment, ensuring that nutrition and knowledge acquisition happen simultaneously. The practice creates strong associations between food and learning, making meals into study sessions disguised as sustenance. The final training snack of the day is consumed as shadows lengthen across the courtyard. A simple mixture of barley meal and water that provides easily digestible carbohydrates for recovery without interfering with the evening meal. The gladiators drink this gruel-like mixture with the same seriousness they bring to weapon maintenance, understanding that proper recovery nutrition is as important as the training itself. As darkness approaches and the training day officially ends, you realize you've witnessed something remarkable. A nutritional system so sophisticated and well-coordinated that it rivals anything found in modern athletic facilities. Every meal, every snack, every cup of pasta has been carefully planned to support maximum performance while maintaining the long-term health of these valuable human investments. You're sitting in the dim, pre-dawn darkness of your cell, listening to the sound of your own heartbeat as it echoes against the stone walls. Tomorrow, or perhaps today, depending on how you count the hours before sunrise, you'll enter the arena for the first time. The knowledge sits in your stomach like a cold stone, heavier than any meal you've ever consumed. Around you, the ludus is unusually quiet, as if even the building itself understands the gravity of what's coming. The ritual begins before the sun touches the horizon, when the kitchen slaves arrive with what can only be described as the most important meal of your life. The tray they place before you contains food that looks remarkably similar to what you've been eating for months, but somehow everything feels different now. The barley porridge seems more substantial, the honey more golden, the dried figs more precious. It's amazing how impending mortal combat can make even the simplest breakfast feel like a feast fit for the gods. The pre-fight meal is consumed in absolute silence, a tradition that has evolved over generations of gladiators who understood that some moments are too sacred for conversation. You can hear the gentle scraping of wooden spoons against clay bowls, the soft breathing of men preparing for what might be their final hours, and the distant sound of early morning birds who have no idea they're witnessing an ancient ritual of preparation and acceptance. Your portion is precisely calculated, enough nutrition to sustain you through combat without creating the sluggishness that comes from eating too much before physical exertion. The trainers have perfected this balance through decades of observation, noting which gladiators perform best with which quantities of food consumed at which times before their fights. It's empirical science disguised as tradition, and you're both beneficiary and test subject. The honey in your porridge serves a dual purpose, providing quick energy for explosive movements while also carrying symbolic weight as an offering to the gods. Ancient Romans believed that honey possessed magical properties, connecting the mortal world to the divine realm. As you swallow each spoonful, you're participating in a ritual that's part nutrition, part prayer, and part desperate hope for survival. You probably wouldn't find this kind of breakfast theology in any modern sports psychology textbook. Historians still debate whether the pre-fight meal was standardized across all gladiator schools, or if different trainers developed their own unique approaches to final nutrition. Archaeological evidence from Pompeii suggests that some schools included specific herbs and spices believed to enhance courage and reduce fear, though the effectiveness of these additions remains a matter of scholarly speculation rather than scientific verification. The timing of this meal is crucial, consumed exactly 3 hours before your scheduled appearance in the arena. This allows for complete digestion while ensuring that energy levels remain optimal throughout what could be an extended period of waiting, preparation, and ultimately combat. The precision suggests that Roman trainers understood metabolic timing in ways that wouldn't be scientifically explained for another 1,000 years. As you eat, you become aware of the weight of tradition surrounding this simple meal. Countless gladiators before you have sat in similar cells, consuming similar food, preparing for similar fates. The continuity is both comforting and terrifying. You're part of an unbroken chain of warriors stretching back generations, but you're also potentially the next link to be severed by sword or spear. The water that accompanies your meal has been blessed by the ludus priest, though whether this is for divine protection or simply psychological comfort remains unclear. The liquid tastes the same as always, clean, cool, slightly mineral-rich from the deep wells. But knowing it carries sacred intentions adds weight to every sip. In a profession where the margin between life and death can be measured in split seconds, any potential advantage is worth embracing. You notice how your fellow gladiators approach this meal with reverence that borders on religious observance. There's no rushing, no casual conversation, no distraction from the serious business of preparation. Each bite is deliberate, each swallow meaningful. The act of eating becomes a form of meditation, focusing the mind while nourishing the body for the trial ahead. The meal concludes with a small portion of aged cheese and a few olives, foods that provide lasting satiety without creating digestive burden. The cheese is sharp and tangy, cutting through the sweetness of the honey-laden porridge, while the olives add salt and fat that will help maintain energy levels during the stress of combat. It's a nutritional profile that modern sports nutritionists would recognize as nearly perfect for sustained athletic performance. As you finish eating, the kitchen slaves collect your bowl with the same solemnity they might show while handling religious artifacts. There's an understanding that this simple clay vessel has played a role in preparing a human being for mortal combat, making it temporarily sacred through association. The respect shown for even the most mundane objects reflects the gravity of what's approaching. The silence that follows the meal is profound, broken only by the sound of men breathing and the distant activities of a city awakening to another day of entertainment and death. You sit with your hands folded, feeling the warmth of the food spreading through your body, knowing that this sensation of satiation and strength might be among the last simple pleasures you experience. In a few hours, you'll enter the arena carrying the energy provided by this carefully planned meal. Whether that energy carries you to victory and glory or simply sustains you through a dignified death remains to be seen. But for now, in this quiet moment between preparation and action, you can taste the honey on your lips and feel grateful for the simple, profound act of being fed. You step into the heart of the gladiators' culinary world, where the air is thick with steam and the rhythmic sound of chopping creates a percussion that would make any modern chef weep with envy. The kitchen isn't the gleaming stainless steel wonderland you might expect. It's a sprawling complex of stone hearths, massive wooden tables scarred by thousands of meals, and clay ovens that radiate heat like ancient dragons breathing contentedly in their sleep. The focal point of this operation is a series of enormous stone hearths, each one large enough to roast an entire ox, though ironically they're used exclusively for preparing plant-based meals that would make your vegetarian cousin beam with pride. Flames dance beneath massive bronze cauldrons that could easily double as bathtubs for particularly small gladiators, filled with bubbling stews that release aromatic clouds carrying hints of herbs, grains, and the earthy satisfaction of honest labor. You watch as the kitchen slaves work with practiced efficiency that would shame most modern restaurant crews. There's no shouting, no chaos, no Gordon Ramsay-style dramatics, just the quiet competence of people who understand that their work literally keeps warriors alive. The head cook, a weathered man whose hands bear the scars of countless burns and cuts, moves through his domain with the authority of a general commanding troops, though his weapons are wooden spoons and his battlefield is made of barley and beans. The preparation process begins before dawn, when the first slaves arrive to rekindle the fires and begin the slow process of cooking grains that will feed 60 hungry gladiators throughout the day. The barley alone requires hours of careful attention, soaking, grinding, cooking, and seasoning in a sequence that's been perfected over generations. You can hear the steady rhythm of mortars and pestles crushing herbs, creating a meditative soundtrack that seems designed to calm both cooks and future consumers. The organization of ingredients would impress any modern supply chain manager. Massive amphorae line the walls like terracotta soldiers, each one labeled with symbols indicating its contents and origin. Egyptian barley stands next to Spanish olive oil, while Gallic beans neighbor Syrian lentils. The kitchen represents a miniature version of the Roman Empire itself, with resources from across the known world converging to fuel these gladiatorial engines. Storage and preservation techniques reveal a sophisticated understanding of food science that predates refrigeration by centuries. Grains are kept in sealed containers with aromatic herbs that repel insects, while vegetables are stored in cool underground chambers that maintain optimal temperature and humidity. The Romans might not have understood bacteria and spoilage in scientific terms, but they certainly knew how to prevent both through careful observation and generations of trial and error. Historians still debate whether gladiator kitchens employed specialized nutritionists or if the cooking knowledge was passed down through oral tradition among the kitchen staff. The complexity of the meal planning suggests formal education, but the lack of written recipes from the period leaves scholars guessing about how this sophisticated culinary knowledge was developed and maintained. The cooking equipment itself tells the story of functional design perfected over centuries. Bronze ladles with long handles protect cooks from splashing hot liquid, while wooden spoons won't scratch the expensive metal cauldrons or impart unwanted flavors to delicate preparations. Clay serving bowls are fired to specific temperatures that prevent cracking under thermal stress, because apparently even ancient Romans understood that broken dishware makes for unhappy gladiators. You notice how the kitchen operates on multiple time scales simultaneously. Some pots contain meals for immediate consumption, while others hold ingredients for tomorrow's meals, and still others are preparing stocks and bases that won't be ready for days. It's a complex choreography of timing and preparation that ensures gladiators never want for proper nutrition, regardless of training schedules or unexpected demands. The social hierarchy within the kitchen mirrors that of the gladiators themselves. Senior cooks handle the most critical preparations, while junior staff manage basic tasks like grinding grain and cleaning equipment. There's a clear chain of command, but also a sense of shared purpose. Everyone understands that their work directly impacts the survival of some of Rome's most valuable athletes. Meal service requires its own specialized logistics. Teams of servers carry heavy trays through narrow corridors, navigating between training gladiators and maintenance workers with the skill of professional waitstaff. The timing must be perfect. Arrive too early and the food gets cold. Too late and hungry gladiators become cranky gladiators, which is generally bad for everyone's life expectancy. The cleanup process is as systematic as the preparation, with every pot scrubbed clean and every surface sanitized using techniques that wouldn't look out of place in a modern commercial kitchen. The Romans understood that food safety was literally a matter of life and death, and they developed cleaning protocols that protected their valuable gladiators from illness that could derail training or, worse, prove fatal during combat. As evening approaches and the final meal preparations wind down, you realize you've witnessed something remarkable, a food service operation that rivals anything found in contemporary institutions. The scale, efficiency, and attention to nutritional detail would challenge modern sports facilities, all accomplished without electricity, refrigeration, or any of the technological aids we consider essential for feeding large groups of high-performance athletes. You're standing in the ludus courtyard as the first autumn chill touches your skin, watching the kitchen staff adapt their ancient meal planning to nature's eternal rhythm. The air carries the crisp promise of changing seasons, and you can smell wood smoke from the cooking fires mixing with the earthy scent of freshly harvested grains arriving from distant farms. It's a reminder that even gladiators, despite their controlled environment, remain connected to the agricultural cycles that governed all Roman life. The seasonal transformation of the gladiator diet is subtle but profound, like watching a master chef adjust recipes based on what the land provides rather than what a menu demands. Summer's abundance of fresh vegetables gives way to preserved foods, dried legumes, and the heartier fare needed to fuel bodies working in cooler temperatures. You watch as the cooks examine newly arrived amphorae filled with autumn's harvest, chestnuts from the hills, late-season olives, and apples that will provide vitamin C through the darker months ahead. The timing couldn't be more perfect for observing this transition. Today marks the arrival of the year's barley harvest from Egypt, and the difference between fresh grain and stored supplies is immediately apparent. The new barley has a lighter color, a sweeter aroma, and a texture that practically glows with vitality. The gladiators gather around as the amphorae are opened, and even these hardened warriors seem to appreciate the promise of superior nutrition that fresh grain represents. Preservation techniques come into full display during this seasonal shift, as the kitchen staff prepares for months when fresh produce becomes scarce. You watch them carefully dry vegetables in the warm autumn sun, creating leathery strips of turnips, onions, and leafy greens that will provide essential nutrients throughout winter. The process is methodical and almost meditative. Each vegetable slice, placed with precision on wooden racks, turned regularly to ensure even drying, and finally stored in sealed containers that protect against moisture and pests. The social dynamics around seasonal eating reveal interesting cultural patterns that extend beyond simple nutrition. Autumn brings a sense of abundance and celebration, even within the controlled environment of a gladiator school. The arrival of fresh chestnuts creates something approaching festivity as gladiators roast them over small fires, sharing the sweet, starchy nuts that provide both calories and comfort as days grow shorter. Historians still debate whether Roman gladiator schools followed formal seasonal dietary protocols or if the changes were simply practical responses to food availability. Archaeological evidence suggests that successful ludus operations maintained detailed records of seasonal nutrition patterns, indicating a sophisticated understanding of how environmental changes affected athletic performance and health. The winter preparation process is particularly fascinating to observe. Root vegetables like turnips and parsnips, which store well in cool conditions, begin appearing more frequently in the daily stews. These hardy vegetables provide the dense nutrition needed to maintain body weight during colder months when the body naturally burns more calories for warmth. The gladiators approach these hearty meals with appreciation that goes beyond mere sustenance. They understand instinctively that winter survival depends on proper autumn preparation. You notice how the cooking methods evolve with the seasons. Summer's quick cooking vegetables give way to longer stewing processes that extract maximum nutrition from tougher autumn and winter produce. The kitchen fills with the rich aromas of slow-cooked meals that simmer for hours, creating broths so dense with nutrients they could probably support a gladiator through combat on their own. The extended cooking times also make the communal dining areas warmer and more comfortable as temperatures drop. The psychological aspects of seasonal eating become apparent as you observe the gladiators' responses to different foods. Fresh autumn apples bring smiles to faces that rarely show emotion, while the first winter stews create a sense of communal comfort that transcends the usual hierarchies. There's something primal about eating seasonally that connects these warriors to the agricultural rhythms that sustain their ancestors, even within their artificial environment. Spring represents renewal and anticipation, both in the diet and in the gladiators' attitudes toward training and competition. The first fresh herbs of the season appear in meals like small green miracles after months of dried seasonings. Wild greens, carefully gathered by knowledgeable slaves, add bitter complexity to the usual barley-based fare, while providing vitamins that help combat the fatigue of winter training. The economic implications of seasonal eating are substantial, as fresh foods command premium prices during their brief availability windows. The lanista must balance nutritional optimization with cost control, sometimes choosing between expensive fresh ingredients and more affordable preserved alternatives. These decisions affect not just the immediate food budget, but also long-term gladiator health and performance, making seasonal meal planning a complex exercise in resource management. Summer brings the year's greatest abundance and the most challenging meal preparation conditions. The heat that makes fresh vegetables plentiful also creates food safety challenges that require careful timing and innovative preservation techniques. You watch as cooks adapt their schedules to work during cooler morning and evening hours, preparing meals in smaller batches to minimize spoilage risk while maximizing nutritional value. You're lying on a simple wooden cot in the medical quarters of the ludus, watching steam rise from a clay bowl that contains what could generously be described as ancient medicine disguised as soup. Your left shoulder throbs where a training partner's wooden sword found its mark yesterday. And the medicus, a Greek freedman whose knowledge of anatomy would impress modern doctors, has prescribed a very specific nutritional therapy that smells suspiciously like someone's grandmother's secret remedy. The bowl before you contains a thick broth made from bone marrow, willow bark, and what appears to be half the herb garden. The aroma is complex and earthy, with hints of bitterness that suggest this meal is more about healing than pleasure. You take your first spoonful and immediately understand why injured gladiators sometimes prefer to stay injured. This tastes like medicine mixed with good intentions and a complete disregard for your taste preferences. But the effectiveness is undeniable. Within hours of consuming this therapeutic concoction, you can feel the inflammation in your shoulder beginning to subside. The willow bark contains what modern science knows as salicylic acid, the same active ingredient in aspirin, while the bone marrow provides the building blocks for tissue repair. It's pharmacology disguised as food, and apparently the Romans figured this out about 2,000 years before pharmaceutical companies started charging premium prices for the same knowledge. The medical diet extends far beyond simple injury treatment. You observe other gladiators receiving carefully tailored nutrition based on their specific health needs. Veterans with joint problems consume meals rich in what the medicus calls warming foods, ginger, garlic, and spices that increase circulation and reduce stiffness. Younger fighters recovering from intense training receive extra portions of protein-rich legumes and nuts that support muscle development and repair. The medicus explains his approach while examining your healing shoulder, his fingers probing gently for signs of improvement. He speaks of food as medicine in ways that wouldn't seem out of place in a modern integrative health clinic, describing how different ingredients affect the body's natural healing processes. Honey for its antimicrobial properties, vinegar for digestion, specific herbs for everything from anxiety to wound healing. You probably wouldn't get this kind of personalized nutritional therapy from most contemporary sports medicine programs. Historians still debate whether Roman medical knowledge was based on systematic observation or inherited wisdom from Greek and Egyptian traditions. The sophistication of gladiator medical nutrition suggests a combination of both. Centuries of empirical testing combined with theoretical frameworks borrowed from established medical traditions across the Mediterranean world. The preparation of medical meals requires specialized knowledge that sets certain kitchen staff apart from regular cooks. You watch as an elderly slave woman, revered throughout the ludus for her healing knowledge, carefully measures herbs and monitors cooking times with the precision of a modern pharmacist. Her recipes are closely guarded secrets, passed down through generations of healers who understood that the line between food and medicine was often just a matter of dosage and preparation. Sleep plays a crucial role in the medical nutrition program, and certain foods are specifically chosen for their ability to promote rest and recovery. Evening meals for injured gladiators include chamomile tea, warm milk with honey, and small portions of lettuce, which contains natural compounds that induce drowsiness. The Romans might not have understood neurotransmitters and sleep cycles, but they certainly knew which foods helped warriors sleep soundly through the pain of healing injuries. The psychological aspects of medical eating are as important as the physical benefits. The ritual of receiving special meals signals to both body and mind that healing is taking place, creating a placebo effect that enhances the actual medicinal properties of the food. The medicus explains how expectation and belief can accelerate recovery, making the act of consuming therapeutic food as important as the nutrients themselves. You notice how the medical diet creates a temporary but significant change in social dynamics within the ludus. Injured gladiators receive special attention and care that acknowledges their vulnerability while maintaining their dignity as warriors. The food becomes a form of communication, expressing concern and support without the need for words that might compromise the stoic image expected of gladiators. The cost of medical nutrition represents a significant investment in human capital, with specialized ingredients often imported from distant provinces. Rare herbs from mountain regions, healing clays from specific deposits, and exotic spices that command premium prices all find their way into therapeutic meals. The Lanista's willingness to pay these costs reflects the economic value of keeping gladiators healthy and competition-ready. Quality control for medical ingredients is even more stringent than for regular food supplies. The medicus personally inspects each shipment of therapeutic herbs, testing their potency and purity with methods that combine scientific observation with intuitive assessment. Contaminated or adulterated medical ingredients could worsen injuries or create new health problems, making quality assurance a matter of life and death. As your shoulder continues to heal over the following days, you experience firsthand how food becomes medicine through careful selection, preparation, and timing. Each therapeutic meal is consumed with intention and attention, creating a mindful eating practice that enhances both physical recovery and mental well-being. The gladiator's approach to medical nutrition represents a holistic understanding of health that modern medicine is only beginning to rediscover. The transition back to regular meals marks a significant milestone in the recovery process, celebrated quietly but meaningfully within the gladiatorial community. Returning to the common dining area signals that you're ready to resume full training and competition, while the knowledge gained during medical treatment enriches your understanding of nutrition's role in peak performance. You're traveling through the dusty roads of Gaul, where the morning mist clings to rolling hills like whispered secrets, and you can taste the difference in the air itself, cleaner, earthier, carrying the promise of ingredients that Roman gladiators in far-off provinces have never experienced. The wagon beneath you creaks rhythmically as it carries amphorae filled with local barley that's darker and nuttier than anything grown in the Mediterranean heartland, a reminder that empire means adaptation, not standardization. The Gallic ludus you're approaching sits nestled between oak forests and wheat fields, its stone walls weathered by northern rains that create a completely different environment for gladiatorial training. You can already smell the cooking fires burning different wood, oak and beech instead of olive and pine, lending a smokier, more complex flavor to meals that must sustain warriors fighting in climates their Roman counterparts would find absolutely miserable. The head cook here, a burly Gaul whose Latin carries the musical lilt of his native tongue, explains how local ingredients have transformed traditional gladiator nutrition into something uniquely regional. Instead of Mediterranean chickpeas, his fighters consume kidney beans that thrive in cooler temperatures. Where Roman gladiators might eat preserved olives, these northern warriors feast on walnuts and hazelnuts that provide similar healthy fats, but with flavors that would make a modern food critic weep with appreciation. The differences extend beyond simple ingredient substitution to fundamental changes in preparation and presentation. Gallic gladiators consume thick porridges enriched with local honey that's darker and more intensely flavored than anything produced in warmer climates. The honey here carries hints of wildflower meadows and forest blooms, creating sweetness with complexity that elevates even the humblest barley gruel into something approaching culinary art. You watch as kitchen slaves prepare what they call warrior's stew, a hearty mixture of local grains, root vegetables, and herbs that grows wild in the surrounding forests. The aroma is earthy and warming, with undertones of juniper and wild garlic that seem designed to fortify both body and spirit against the harsh northern winters. It's comfort food for people whose comfort comes from knowing they can survive whatever nature throws at them. The beer culture of Gaul creates perhaps the most significant departure from Roman gladiatorial tradition. While Mediterranean fighters consume diluted wine and pasca, northern gladiators drink alesh brewed from local grains that provide carbohydrates, B vitamins, and what modern nutritionists would recognize as beneficial probiotics. The brewing process creates beverages that are safer than water while providing genuine nutritional value. Though you suspect the gladiators appreciate the mild alcoholic content as much as the health benefits. Historians still debate whether regional dietary variations were officially sanctioned by Roman authorities or if they developed organically as local trainers adapted to available resources. The consistency of certain practices across distant provinces suggests some level of central planning, but the creative adaptations indicate considerable local autonomy in implementation. The German provinces present even more dramatic nutritional adaptations, where gladiators consume rye bread so dense it could probably serve as armor in emergency situations. The grain thrives in northern climates where wheat struggles, providing complex carbohydrates with a nutty, slightly sour flavor that pairs surprisingly well with the preserved meats that occasionally supplement the primarily plant-based diet in these resource-challenged regions. African provinces showcase the opposite extreme, where gladiator schools take advantage of year-round growing seasons and exotic ingredients unavailable elsewhere in the empire. You imagine gladiators in Alexandria consuming dates, figs, and spices that transform basic barley porridge into meals worthy of imperial banquets. The abundance of fresh fruits provides vitamins and natural sugars that support training in climates where dehydration poses constant challenges. The logistics of maintaining nutritional standards across such diverse environments reveals the sophisticated supply chains that connected even remote gladiator schools to the broader Roman economy. Egyptian barley might find its way to British ludus operations, while Gallic honey could sweeten meals for gladiators training in Spanish schools. Its globalization achieved through careful planning and efficient transportation networks that wouldn't be matched until modern times. Regional fighting styles influenced dietary adaptations in fascinating ways. Northern gladiators, who fought in heavier armor to protect against cooler temperatures, required more calorie-dense foods to fuel their strength-based combat techniques. Southern fighters, who relied on speed and agility in lighter equipment, consumed more easily digestible meals that wouldn't weigh them down during rapid maneuvers. The preservation techniques varied dramatically based on local climate conditions and available resources. Mediterranean schools could rely on salt curing and oil preservation, while northern facilities developed smoking and fermentation methods that worked better in humid conditions. These regional specialties created dietary diversity that probably made gladiator transfers between provinces quite an adventure in culinary adjustment. As you continue your journey through the provincial gladiator schools, you realize you're witnessing something remarkable: the adaptation of a standardized nutritional philosophy to local conditions and resources. Each region developed its own interpretation of gladiatorial nutrition while maintaining the core principles that kept fighters healthy, strong, and competition-ready regardless of whether they trained under Mediterranean sun or northern rain. You're sitting at the edge of the hierarchy, watching the dinner distribution unfold like a carefully choreographed dance where your position determines not just where you sit, but what's actually in your bowl. The veteran gladiators occupy the benches closest to the kitchen, their scarred faces illuminated by flickering oil lamps as they receive portions that are noticeably larger and considerably more appetizing than what you're about to experience as the new guy. The social stratification of mealtime is immediately apparent and absolutely ruthless in its precision. At the top sit the champions, gladiators who've survived multiple arena appearances and earned their reputation through blood and skill. Their bowls contain not just the standard barley porridge, but additional delicacies that mark their elevated status: honey, dried fruits, nuts, and occasionally even small portions of cheese that make your mouth water just watching them eat it. The established fighters, those with several victories but no claim to legendary status, occupy the middle tier, both literally. The veterans explain this system matter-of-factly. Earning better food provides motivation for improvement while ensuring that the most valuable gladiators receive nutrition that matches their investment value. It's capitalism applied to life-and-death entertainment, and the logic is as brutal as it is effective. Historians still debate whether this hierarchical feeding system was universal across all gladiator schools or if different trainers developed their own approaches to motivational nutrition. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites suggests widespread adoption of similar practices, indicating that food-based status systems were considered essential for maintaining order and encouraging advancement within gladiatorial ranks. The psychological impact of dining hierarchy extends far beyond simple nutrition. Sitting at the newcomer's table creates a constant reminder of your current status while providing clear visual evidence of what advancement might bring. Every meal becomes a motivation session disguised as sustenance, with better food serving as tangible reward for improved performance and survival skills. Seasonal variations in food quality create additional layers of complexity within the hierarchy. During times of abundance, even newcomers receive meals that approach palatability, while lean periods sharpen the distinctions between ranks. Champions continue eating well regardless of supply fluctuations, while lower-tier gladiators experience the full impact of economic pressures and seasonal shortages. The retirement system adds another dimension to dining hierarchy, as gladiators who've earned their freedom through exceptional service often remain connected to the school as trainers or advisors. These emeritus gladiators receive meals that acknowledge their past achievements while reflecting their current non-combatant status. They eat better than active newcomers, but not as well as current champions, creating a complex social order that honors both past accomplishments and present contributions. You observe how the hierarchy affects not just what gladiators eat, but how they eat. Champions dine with leisure and confidence, savoring their food and engaging in conversation that ranges from strategy to philosophy. Middle-tier fighters eat efficiently but socially, maintaining camaraderie while staying focused on advancement. Newcomers like yourself eat quickly and quietly, more concerned with consuming adequate nutrition than enjoying the dining experience. The serving staff understand their role in maintaining this system, treating different tables with varying degrees of deference that reinforces status distinctions. Champions receive attentive service with fresh utensils and prompt refills, while newcomers make do with basic service and the understanding that complaints would be both futile and potentially dangerous to their standing within the school. As the meal concludes, you watch the cleanup process reveal final hierarchical details. Champions leave their bowls where they sit, confident that staff will handle disposal. Veterans clear their own places, but with casual efficiency. Newcomers not only clean their eating area, but often assist with kitchen duties, understanding that every aspect of ludus life reflects and reinforces their current position in the gladiatorial pecking order. You're standing outside the storage rooms where the forbidden foods are kept, their very existence creating an atmosphere of temptation that hangs in the air like incense at a religious ceremony. The heavy wooden door is marked with symbols that warn against unauthorized entry. Though honestly, the real deterrent is probably the knowledge that getting caught with contraband food could result in punishments that make a bad day in the arena look like a relaxing spa treatment. The list of prohibited foods reads like a modern athlete's nightmare diet plan, though for completely different reasons than you might expect. Meat tops the forbidden list, not because of health concerns, but because Roman trainers believed consuming flesh made gladiators too aggressive and unpredictable outside of combat situations. Apparently, they preferred their human-killing machines to be manageable between fights, which seems like reasonable human resource management when your employees are literally trained murderers. Wine of quality higher than basic table grade is strictly forbidden, creating a situation where gladiators are simultaneously the most pampered and most restricted athletes in Roman society. They receive excellent nutrition, top-tier medical care, and professional training, but they can't enjoy a decent vintage even if they could afford it. It's like being a professional athlete who's forbidden from experiencing anything that might bring actual pleasure to the eating experience. The enforcement of these dietary restrictions requires constant vigilance from trainers who understand that contraband food represents more than simple rule breaking. It threatens the carefully balanced nutritional and psychological systems that keep gladiators performing at peak levels. You watch as suspicious packages arriving at the ludus are inspected with the thoroughness of modern customs agents, though the stakes for smuggling are considerably higher than contemporary import duties. Sexual foods, anything believed to enhance libido or romantic desire, are banned with particular fervor. Oysters, certain spices, and foods shaped suggestively are forbidden not just for consumption, but even for possession. The Romans understood that gladiators needed to channel their physical energy into combat, training rather than romantic pursuits, though this policy probably made the ludus social life considerably less interesting than your average college dormitory. Rich pastries and luxury sweets occupy their own category of prohibition, banned not for health reasons, but because they're considered softening influences that might compromise the mental toughness required for mortal combat. The logic suggests that gladiators who develop tastes for refined pleasures might become less willing to face death for entertainment, which would seriously compromise the business model of the entire gladiatorial industry. Historians still debate whether these dietary restrictions were based on empirical observation of gladiator behavior or inherited from Greek athletic traditions that emphasize discipline and self-denial. The consistency of prohibited foods across different schools and regions suggests systematic reasoning rather than arbitrary rulemaking, though the underlying scientific understanding was obviously limited by ancient knowledge of nutrition and psychology. The psychological impact of forbidden foods extends beyond simple deprivation to create a complex relationship with desire and discipline. Gladiators must learn to resist temptations that are readily available to free citizens, developing self-control that serves them well in the arena where momentary weaknesses can prove fatal. It's behavioral conditioning disguised as dietary management, and the effectiveness appears to have been considerable. Contraband detection requires sophisticated understanding of both food chemistry and human psychology. Trainers learn to recognize the signs of secret consumption, changes in mood, performance, or behavior that might indicate dietary violations. The most experienced supervisors can apparently detect unauthorized wine consumption days after the fact, though whether this represents genuine expertise or effective intimidation tactics remains unclear. The punishment system for dietary violations operates on escalating severity that would make modern prison wardens nod with recognition. First offenses might result in reduced food rations or additional training duties, while repeat violations could lead to public humiliation, physical punishment, or even sale to less prestigious schools. The ultimate threat, expulsion from the ludus system entirely, represents economic and social death for most gladiators. Seasonal enforcement of food restrictions becomes particularly challenging during festivals and celebrations when luxury foods are abundant throughout Roman society. The contrast between gladiatorial dietary discipline and civilian indulgence creates additional psychological pressure, as fighters watch free citizens enjoying exactly the foods they're forbidden to consume. It's institutional FOMO taken to life-threatening extremes. The medical exemption system provides the only legitimate pathway to consuming otherwise forbidden foods, though the requirements are stringent and carefully monitored. Gladiators recovering from serious injuries might receive small portions of meat or quality wine as part of their therapeutic nutrition, but these exceptions are temporary and closely supervised to prevent abuse of the medical system. As you observe the daily inspections and enforcement procedures, you realize that the forbidden food system represents more than dietary control. It's a comprehensive approach to psychological conditioning that prepares gladiators for the ultimate discipline required in mortal combat. Learning to resist simple pleasures builds the mental strength needed to face death with dignity and skill. You're sitting in a Roman villa centuries after the last gladiator hung up his sword, watching a dinner party unfold where wealthy citizens consume meals that would be instantly recognizable to any veteran of the arena. The irony isn't lost on you. These aristocrats, who once cheered for gladiatorial bloodsport, are now enthusiastically adopting the dietary practices of the very warriors they used to watch die for entertainment. Talk about cultural appropriation with a side of historical amnesia. The influence of gladiatorial nutrition on Roman society began subtly, like most cultural revolutions that start in the margins and work their way to the mainstream. Wealthy Romans, always eager to associate themselves with symbols of strength and vitality, began incorporating gladiator-inspired dishes into their elaborate banquets. Barley porridge, once considered the humble fuel of arena warriors, became a fashionable delicacy when prepared with expensive honey and exotic spices. The medical establishment embraced gladiatorial nutrition with the enthusiasm of modern wellness influencers discovering a new superfood. Roman physicians, already influenced by Greek medical traditions, found that the plant-based diets and careful meal timing used in gladiator schools produced remarkable health outcomes in their civilian patients. The systematic approach to nutrition that kept fighters alive in the arena proved equally effective at keeping wealthy Romans healthy in their villas. Military applications of gladiatorial nutrition transformed how the Roman legions approached field rations and campaign logistics. Generals who understood that well-fed soldiers fought better began adopting the high-energy, portable food preparations developed for gladiator training. The famous pasca that sustained gladiators became standard issue for legionaries, who discovered that this acidic beverage prevented scurvy and provided electrolytes during long marches across hostile territory. The monasteries of early Christianity inadvertently preserved gladiatorial dietary wisdom when they developed their own communal eating practices. The emphasis on simple, plant-based meals consumed in contemplative silence echoed the disciplined approach to nutrition that had sustained arena warriors. Medieval monks probably never realized they were following nutritional principles first refined in schools that trained men for mortal combat, though the irony would have appealed to their sense of divine humor. Historians still debate whether the fall of gladiatorial games led to the loss of sophisticated nutritional knowledge, or if the principles were so well integrated into Roman culture that they survived in other forms. Archaeological evidence suggests that the systematic approach to athletic nutrition continued in modified forms long after the last arena closed, indicating remarkable cultural persistence of practical wisdom developed through centuries of trial and error. The Renaissance rediscovery of classical texts included nutritional treatises that referenced gladiatorial dietary practices, sparking renewed interest in the relationship between food and physical performance. Humanist scholars, fascinated by every aspect of classical antiquity, found themselves studying ancient meal planning with the same intensity they brought to poetry and philosophy. It's probably the only time in history when academic conferences included presentations on optimal barley preparation techniques. Modern sports nutrition owes an unacknowledged debt to gladiatorial dietary innovations, though the connection is rarely recognized by contemporary practitioners. The emphasis on plant-based proteins, careful hydration management, and strategic meal timing that characterizes current athletic nutrition echoes principles first developed to sustain warriors in the Roman arena. The main difference is that modern athletes don't face literal life or death consequences for poor dietary choices, though some coaches might disagree. The psychological aspects of gladiatorial eating, the use of food as motivation, status symbol, and social control, influenced Roman approaches to everything from military discipline to child rearing. The understanding that shared meals could build loyalty and hierarchy while providing essential nutrition, became foundational to Roman social organization, extending far beyond the specific context of gladiatorial schools. Trade networks developed to supply gladiator schools created commercial relationships that outlasted the games themselves, establishing supply chains for specialty foods that continued serving civilian markets long after the last arena fell silent. The Egyptian barley that once fueled gladiatorial combat found new markets among health-conscious Romans who believed that consuming the same grains as legendary warriors would transfer some of their strength and vitality. The preservation techniques perfected for gladiatorial nutrition influenced Roman food technology in ways that affected the entire empire. Methods for storing grains, drying vegetables, and preparing portable nutrition developed for arena warriors proved equally valuable for civilian applications, improving food security and nutrition across all social classes. Educational institutions throughout the Roman world began incorporating modified versions of gladiatorial meal practices into their curricula, understanding that the discipline and nutritional wisdom developed for combat training could benefit students preparing for less violent but equally demanding careers in law, politics, and administration. As you observe this dinner party where Roman citizens unknowingly consume meals inspired by gladiatorial nutrition, you realize you're witnessing the ultimate victory of arena warriors over their oppressors. The dietary practices that sustained enslaved fighters eventually conquered the tables of free citizens, proving that sometimes the most lasting revolutions happen one meal at a time. You're standing in the doorway of a different kind of dining hall, where the sound of weapons has been replaced by the gentle clinking of cups raised in celebration. The air carries the sweet warmth of honeyed wine and the comfortable aroma of bread baked with care rather than urgency. This is where gladiators come to feast when their fighting days are finally over, when the arena's roar has faded into memory, and when food can return to being nourishment rather than fuel for survival. The retirement banquet unfolds before you like a carefully choreographed dream, where warriors who once ate to live now dine to celebrate their survival. The tables groan under the weight of foods that were forbidden during their fighting years. Roasted meats that glisten in the lamplight, wines that actually taste like sunshine instead of vinegar, and delicate pastries that would have been confiscated faster than you could say dietary restriction during their arena careers. You watch as Lucius, a veteran retiarius whose net fighting skills earned him legend status, slowly savors a piece of succulent roasted pork. His scarred hands, which once wielded trident and net with deadly precision, now hold a simple eating knife with the gentleness of someone rediscovering pleasure after years of denial. The smile on his weathered face suggests that freedom might taste even better than victory, though you probably wouldn't want to interrupt his dinner to ask about the comparison. The transformation in eating habits reveals itself gradually, like watching flowers bloom in carefully tended gardens. Men who spent years consuming meals with military efficiency now linger over their food, engaging in conversations that range from philosophy to family stories they've never had time to share. The rigid structure of gladiatorial nutrition gives way to the simple joy of eating what you want, when you want it, without someone calculating your protein intake or monitoring your hydration levels. The guest list for this retirement feast includes luminaries from across Roman society, senators, wealthy merchants, and fellow gladiators who've earned their freedom through skill, luck, or simple endurance. The presence of such diverse company speaks to the unique social position of successful gladiators, who occupy a space between celebrity and former slave that's unlike anything in the modern world. Historians still debate whether retirement feasts were formal ceremonies or informal gatherings, but the archaeological evidence suggests they were significant enough to warrant considerable expense and elaborate preparation. The discovery of specialized serving vessels and exotic ingredient remains at former gladiator properties indicates that these meals were anything but casual affairs. The symbolic importance of the retirement feast extends far beyond simple celebration. For men who've spent years living under dietary restrictions designed to optimize performance and maintain discipline, the freedom to choose their own food represents the ultimate expression of personal autonomy. Each bite of previously forbidden food becomes an act of liberation, a small but meaningful declaration of independence from the systems that once controlled every aspect of their lives. The medical implications of dietary transition are carefully managed by the same physicians who once treated their combat injuries. Sudden changes from gladiatorial nutrition to unrestricted eating could cause digestive problems and other health issues, so the feast represents a gradual introduction to foods that will become part of their new civilian lives. It's like nutritional rehabilitation disguised as celebration. As the evening progresses and the wine flows more freely, you notice how the conversations shift from reminiscences of arena glory to plans for civilian futures. Some retired gladiators become trainers themselves, passing on their knowledge to new generations of fighters. Others invest their earnings in businesses, farms, or other ventures that will sustain them through their remaining years. The emotional weight of the occasion becomes apparent as you observe the quiet moments between toasts and laughter. These are men who've faced death repeatedly, who've lost friends and comrades to the arena's demands, and who now must learn to live without the adrenaline and purpose that combat provided. The feast serves as both celebration and therapy, marking the end of one identity while helping to forge another. The later hours bring a gentle quietness that settles over the gathering like a comfortable blanket. Voices become softer, gestures more relaxed, as the reality of survival and freedom sinks in. Some gladiators fall asleep at the table, their heads resting peacefully on arms that once wielded deadly weapons. The sight is both poignant and beautiful. Warriors finally at rest, no longer fighting against time, opponents, or fate. And as the oil lamps burn lower and the night deepens, you find yourself surrounded by the peaceful breathing of men who've earned their rest through courage, skill, and extraordinary endurance. Their empty plates tell stories of hunger finally satisfied, restrictions finally lifted, and lives finally lived on their own terms. The gladiator's diet has served its purpose, transforming boys into warriors and warriors into legends. And now it can simply be food again. In this quiet space, where the only sounds are gentle snores and the occasional settling of ancient wood, you can feel the weight of all those meals, all those carefully measured portions, all those moments when nutrition meant the difference between life and death. But tonight, in this peaceful room filled with sleeping champions, food has returned to its most basic and beautiful purpose, bringing comfort, satisfaction, and the simple pleasure of being alive. The story of the gladiator's diet ends here, not with the clash of swords or the roar of crowds, but with the gentle rhythm of satisfied sleep, the quiet breathing of free men, and the knowledge that sometimes the greatest victory is simply living long enough to enjoy a meal without fear. Sleep well, warrior. You've earned your rest.